Welcome to the Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast, where we talk all things Panther City Lacrosse Club. Now here are your hosts, Nicholas and Andy.
Welcome everyone to a very special episode of Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast. I'm of course Nicholas, joined by Andy.
Hello, hello.
Andy, we have a guest joining us today, but honestly it's our first guest we've ever had on the show that has no connection to Panther City other than interviewing some of the members of their team.
Well, yeah, of course, the lacrosse community is really close-knit and homegrown, so it's awesome to have another guy who runs a show similar to ours join us today.
Yeah, well, we'll get right into it. I mean, he is the host of the Lax in the Booth podcast. Please welcome on today, Mr. Corey Fields.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, it's something we've always kind of talked about is just like having people on that, you know, aren't strictly just Panther City fans or work for Panther City, but across the NLL, obviously, and then across, you know, just the sport of lacrosse. Because, I mean, you have people who are, you know, box lacrosse fans, some that are field, some that are both. And so it's always good to kind of reach out and try to bring people in and get some good opinions from everywhere. But first off, I mean, we always start off our interviews like this. I definitely want to get a feel, especially for those listening to your stuff for the first time, but just kind of where you came from, kind of a more or less an origin story of where you're from and what got you interested in lacrosse to begin with.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I was born in Kitchener, Ontario, up here in Canada. I live in a small town just outside of it now with my wife. And, kind of lacrosse for me didn't really start till the season before the pandemic shut down, actually. So 2019 there, I went to my first lacrosse game with one of my good friends who's a long-time season ticket Toronto Rock holder. So we went to go see Toronto Rock versus the Rochester Nighthawks, and that's kind of where I fell in love with the game. I mean, that first game, growing up playing hockey, I was always loving the fast pace, banging bodies, you know, getting a little bit gritty there. So to see another sport like this was really entertaining for me. I think one thing that really stuck out that I remember from that game was watching Craig Wendy play in net. Growing up playing goalie, being an athletic goalie and kind of priding myself in that, watching that style of goaltending in lacrosse really drew me to watching his game and to loving the sport itself as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously hockey goalies and you know, box lacrosse goalies have similarities, but it is, like you said, it's just kind of a different style, a different feel for the game. So that's something I definitely caught on to when I started watching a little bit more, but and I know Andy did too.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of along those same lines. I know you've got the sport is kind of a bigger presence up where you're at. Do you ever play leisurely or in your free time with clubs or anything like that?
Yeah, so I actually played my first season this year.
Nice.
So 27 years old here, playing my first season. It was a bit of a grind. Started it off, first game, got a little knee injury, held me out for a few weeks. Played a few weeks, got my first goal, and then ended the last game with a cracked rib. So it kind of went full circle for me, and I got the full experience, but I loved it. I mean, it was a great time. I got to play alongside my brother, which was a ton of fun. I got to play alongside a former guest, Marcus Medill, which, I mean, for me, that was a really cool moment.
Is it like just a community league or?
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of like a beer league up here. They call it SWOL. It's the Southwest Ontario Lacrosse League. A lot of junior guys. So there's a few junior A guys, junior B, junior C, and then some former guys that played in like the Worlds and that play in it. So there's a good amount of talent in it. Definitely kind of like a welcome to the sport thing for me in my first year. But I mean, I think I handled myself relatively well. So.
Yeah, that's something I know Andy had been talking about, looking at like just community leagues around here, it's obviously tougher down here in Texas.
Yeah. There's not as much of a presence down here, and you know, I'm in my mid to late 30s now. I don't know if my body would be able to take pounding of lacrosse in general, much less of box lacrosse.
Right. Well, and so I mean, you kind of touched on it already. So obviously, up in Canada, you grew up playing hockey. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously those skills from hockey, I mean, how have you seen it obviously with your first year of playing lacrosse there, but how have you seen those skills kind of translate from that sport into lacrosse?
So yeah, I mean, growing up, I played a lot of ball hockey up here in Canada. So the arena we played at for lacrosse, I grew up playing ball hockey in. So playing goalie growing up most of the time, I would say, I mean, seeing the ball really helped being a goalie growing up, and then seeing it in lacrosse, it's a lot quicker than a ball in ball hockey is, or even a puck. And then I played some out as well in ball hockey. So, I mean, running the floor, I was kind of used to. Obviously, I'm no spring chicken anymore, but it kind of stuck with me there. And then I think just like the IQ and the positioning of things, I think it really translated for me playing defense in lacrosse, playing defense in hockey. You're kind of just playing that zone coverage anyway. So I think that really translated for me.
That's awesome. I mean, that's good to hear that. And obviously, so first year, so I'm guessing you hope to continue this on for the next few years and get a good community career out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Less injuries, but definitely hoping to continue it.
Right. Well, I think you kind of touched on it. You know, what, and you know, we kind of talked about your interest in box lacrosse, how that got started. But I will go ahead and ask. I mean, you mentioned Toronto Rock. I mean, who would be your favorite team in the NLL overall?
I mean, it has to be the Toronto Rock. Me, my wife, my brother have season tickets there. But doing the podcast, it kind of came to be that I kind of more enjoy watching individual players, especially ones that I really connected with over the podcast. So in my heart, Toronto Rock's my team, but when we go to the game, I'm always rooting for some guys on the other team to do well and succeed. So,
As a former goalie, do you see yourself gravitating towards kind of keeping track of what, as like Del Bianco and others are doing, or is it just depends on who you're watching and what their skill set is?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of goalies that I really like watching in the NLL. Zach Higgins is high on my list. Craig Wendy when he was in there. Del Bianco definitely has to be up there. I think a lot more of those athletic goalies really draw my eye to it. Just the way that they play, the way that they move. I feel like they see the ball a lot better, and then those goalies tend to have, I would think, better passing in transition as well. They can really chuck the ball down the floor accurately, right? So
that's one thing we've talked about, you know, with Daymud. I mean, I think he continues to work on it for Panther City. It's not something he's got down pat, but he's definitely gotten better as the years went on, and so you can definitely tell it's something he's trying to work on.
Yeah. Origo got us with a pretty good one to Westburg over the weekend. It's kind of like, well, hats off to them for getting that play down.
Yeah, no, we played some pretty good goalies the last few games for sure.
Well, kind of the main point of this, or what we wanted to talk about, what are the things that led you to starting a lacrosse podcast in the first place? Obviously, you love the game and everything, but taking that next step into kind of giving back to the community, what kind of led you down that path?
yeah, so after that game, Rochester and Toronto that I briefly talked about before, I went to a second game following up. I can't remember who it was against. And then I was planning on going to the third game, and it was the game right before they shut down against Calgary. So my second cousins are Helen and Liam Leclerc.
Okay.
So yeah, I fell in love with the game obviously pretty quick there, and I learned pretty quick that these guys have to live a career outside of their career. So yeah, I was laying in bed one night, and I looked over to the light, and I said, I think I want to start a podcast. I want people to know that stuff that I didn't know. I didn't get to hear about the game much growing up. So I wanted to see if I could educate some more people on it, kind of get a background look on it, right? So at that time, I was like, you know what, I'll message some players. I'll see if they'd be interested in doing it. So I messaged Nick Rose, Riley Hutchcraft, and Liam Leclerc went first three. And they all got back to me. They're like, yeah, like totally down for it. Let's do it. I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens then, right? So I was hoping for a couple episodes when I started it, and it just kind of kept going from there. I've been pretty fortunate to have a lot of good friendships come out of it, to meet a lot of nice guys. I mean, in that first few games that I watched with the Toronto Rock, Johnny Palace was always a guy that I was like, this guy's it, right? And then I can watch his highlights for hours on end and I wouldn't get sick of it. So I mean, having someone like him on my podcast and getting one of his game used helmets from the last season with Toronto, I was like, this is unbelievable. So yeah, I was always trying to find ways doing my podcast to see if there's things that I can do to give back to the lacrosse community and keep educating people on it. And then it's just been a lot of fun talking to these guys. I mean, everyone in the lacrosse community has the same goal, and that's to grow the game. So if that's something we can do, I mean, if 10 people listen to it or 100 people listen to it and one person starts watching it and loving it, then we're doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds... Well, first off, I want to point out, I mean, we've definitely discovered since starting this just how close the lacrosse community is, you know, in general, just like the players, you know, growing up together and obviously knowing each other throughout time. And so it's just kind of crazy figuring that out, but it's kind of the same story with us. I mean, we saw an opportunity to say, hey, let's try to spread the word, at least especially around this area, you know, about our box lacrosse team that we really love. You know, and after the first season, I was like, yeah, I wish we could do something to kind of help spread the word. And Andy, he played a little bit back in high school and stuff like that. And so, yeah, he knew about it, and we went to a game together that first season, and there was just that connection, and I reached out to him and said kind of same thing. I was just like, hey man, you want to do a podcast? And thankfully he said yes. So
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun to come up here and pretend to know what I talk about from time to time.
yeah, that's what we do. We sometimes, I will say this, Andy is very good at, I mean, he has a whole portion of the episode, every episode, Mr. Andrews stats of the game, and it's just stuff that I don't even think about. He's really good about dissecting. But like you said, just helping grow the information to the community, and I think that's something I think podcasts in general are really good at. So that's pretty awesome to hear from you. I mean, I'll ask this. I mean, we've only done a few interviews with our podcast, but whenever you do yours, obviously you do it on a more consistent basis. How do you come up with like what to ask, what questions to ask, what topics to talk about every episode?
I usually spend hours or my work days thinking about it, and I kind of sometimes I Google things to ask, things that I would find interesting, and then I don't know. I try to keep consistency. I do try to mix it up once in a while too. But I mean, even I could ask the same questions all 150 episodes, but everyone has their own story. Everyone has a different way of how they got there. You know, what lacrosse does for them, a different journey outside of lacrosse. So yeah, I try to keep things pretty meat and potatoes there, and you know, I let them tell their story, and I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like this. I mean, you know, pretty basic questions, but it's like, what can we branch off from answers and stuff like that? So, no, and some of the stories you get from those players, I mean, you probably never hear about anywhere else. So,
yeah, and it's so hard not to get starstruck sometimes. Like, there's so many guys where I'm like, man, like I look up to you, I love what you do and everything, and then I get to talk to them, and I'm just like, I'm trying not to just like drop my jaw every time they say something. So,
right, I think that happened. So we finally we were brave enough to reach out for media passes this year, and I definitely know, I don't know about Andy, but the first time I sat down and Coach TK, Tracy Kolesky, was sitting there in front of me, I'm just like, I'm nervous to even say anything. So, no, that definitely happens.
Yeah. When you get a guy like a legend like Callan Crawford sitting across, kind of there to answer your questions, it's just kind of a nice feeling and more fuzzies and all that. Along the same lines, with over 140 episodes, you've interviewed a ton of lacrosse legends, a lot of diverse names, players like Dan Taylor, Jake Saunders, Jake Fox, former Panther City player, and a whole lot more. Would you say that you have a favorite episode overall, or a batch of them out of all the ones that you've done?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, I would like to say every single one is my favorite one, but there are a few that stand out for me. I would say the Steve Toll, first Hall of Famer I had on the podcast. Absolute great guy. On my golf tournament last year, the first one that I ever hosted for it, I got to spend the day in his foursome. And I mean, talking to him on the podcast, talking to him on the golf course, same guy, same beauty. Few others that are pretty notable for me. Talking to Brock Boyle about mental health awareness. That was a big one for me. And then having the chance to talk to Craig, Wendy, Patrick, and his daughter Caroline about the goals for Avery. That's pretty near and dear with Craig, Wendy, and his family. So I mean, those are definitely three that really stick out to me. I mean, I could keep going. Amber Hill and Kylie O'Miller, my two of the best female lacrosse players to ever play the game. That's a no-brainer for me too. So yeah, there's a ton I could go through, but I would say top 5. Those are probably my top 5.
Okay, it's tough picking your favorite kid.
It's gonna be hard with all those episodes too. You mentioned Steve Toll. I mean, obviously, we get to see him week in and week out. I will say, he's probably been the most interesting person to watch on the bench, because he is definitely the most active person on the bench.
Oh yeah, and when he's coaching Junior A too, beside the chance to sponsor a Brampton goalie's jersey last year, and when St. Catharines came to Brampton, I mean, that barn's not very big, and you can hear him screaming from the bench.
Well, you can definitely tell when the defense isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. I sat in there for the press area where we are for Panther City. It's a good view of everything, including the bench. And so, man, just watching him sometimes, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid he's going to jump out on the field at some point. Well, so obviously we touched on your multiple episodes. Are there things that you've learned not only about the players, but maybe like the league or different leagues, or anything in general that you've learned since starting the podcast?
I mean, there's obviously a lot that I learned being pretty fresh with it in 2019. A big one was the careers outside of the career. Definitely really sticks out to me. I mean, I'd say how humble these players are for being pro athletes. I mean, I had the chance to talk to a few pro hockey players as well, and I mean, these pro lacrosse players, they always have the best intentions. I mean, as you can probably see in my background, I have a lot of stuff from a lot of the guys I've had on my podcast, and that's just, giving them some gear. They show some love for the podcast. I'm a big gearhead, so having gloves or helmets or something is a pretty fine return as well. So
yeah, and it's just it's great just to kind of get that. I don't know. No words can describe just whenever you're talking to them. Just you mentioned how humble they are. I mean, every player we've interviewed after games, they're just super nice about stuff, even after losses. I mean, it's just they're in the moment, but they're in the moment with you, which I think is always good.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Casey Busher, who used to do like PR and marketing and social for the Panther City last year, she touched upon that as well, how they're real down to earth. Part of that's probably because a lot of them have second jobs and careers outside of lacrosse, and then they play the game because it's their passion. They at least at this point, that they're not necessarily going to get rich off of it, but so it's cool to see them playing for the love of the game and just being really approachable to people like us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that, but some of the players, I mean, they play all year. They play, NLL, and then they go to PLL and play there, and it's just like, man, it's crazy that they have that job, like you said, and then they have extra stuff they do outside.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously interviewed a good amount of Panther City players, past, current, and future probably. Tyler Burton before he was with us. I know Ryan McLean, Mike Triolio, Cam Winkrenia, Liam Patton, Toll, you mentioned, Medi, and more recently Showtime and Callum Crawford. Do you have a favorite interview with a Panther City player so far?
Favorite interview, I mean, obviously Steve Toll has to be up there. Tyler Burton, super great guy, and probably Ryan McLean as well. I was, like I said, pretty fortunate to get to meet Steve Toll a couple times in person and get to chat with him. Message back and forth with Tyler Burton once in a while still, and same with Ryan McLean. So, I mean, I think those were all 3 pretty good episodes, and 3 really good guys to go along with it. So,
awesome. Get well soon, Tyler. We miss you on the dot.
Right? That's one piece we've been missing. I will say, I think Andy might be slightly jealous that you got to interview Medi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he I mean, like all those guys, even Liam Patton, absolute beauties. Brent Mitchell, got to talk to him. Yeah, I mean, they're all such great guys. It's so hard to choose just like a few that have been really good.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the time it takes for them to take out of their day and just sit down and talk with you, that's you know, it's hard to pick a good one. It's hard to pick your favorite one, but well, I did want to touch on this. I mean, obviously, you know, we're new to the league. I mean, you've only been following since 2019, but you know, Panther City has only been in the league for a few years now, going in on year 3. I do kind of want more of an outside opinion, and that's why I was wanting to ask this question. But from the outside looking in, especially from up in Canada, an organization like Panther City, what would you say are some good things that they're doing, not only, you know, as an organization and player and coach wise, but like what are some things they also might need to improve on, maybe going forward into the future?
Okay, I'll start with the improve on. I mean, like Andy said, the face-off. You guys need Tyler Burton back big time. I would say that's like my only like negative thing. I mean, Nick Demude, Cam McLeod, both good goaltenders. The defense looks really good. The one thing I think that they're doing really well is that offense. I mean, these young guys coming in, Ryan Sheridan, Jason Knox, Jonathan Donville. I mean, you got to mix in there with Callum Crawford being a little bit of a vet there, but they're dominating. They have, I mean, this year, obviously, with some of the younger guys, you know, coming in that there's still some things to learn, but I think over the next few years, they're going to kind of be what everyone thought Albany would be and what Albany is doing now, right? I mean, you look at them with Ty Kurtz and Alex Simmons and Marshall Palace, and they have all those young guys up front just lighting it up. I think that's where Panther City's, they're on their way to that.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about how essentially bringing in Crawford in, knowing that we had Sheridan and Knox kind of waiting in the wings after the draft, it made a guy as talented as Patrick Dodds not expendable, but willing to kind of part with him to bring some other needed pieces in. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on the face-offs. Ronan Push, when he's in there, he does a valiant job, but we talked about it recently when we were reviewing this past weekend's game. I mean, it's a tall order when you're going up against guys like Trevor Baptiste and Joe Post trying to make good things happen.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned Albany. I think for us, Albany was more of a surprise than we expected.
Yes.
I expected them to be, you know, in contention and be steady, but not like what they've been doing this year. I mean, they have been doing good. Well, and then on top of that, I mean, you talked about, you know, Toronto being your team. I mean, gosh dang, they came down here, and I thought we could keep it close with them, and they started pulling away in that fourth quarter. But that's another team. I feel like Toronto this year, Albany, obviously Buffalo's always in the thick of things. I don't know. Okay, so off the wall question: who are one of your expectations with this? We forgot to even touch about our, you know, unified standings now, but who are the teams you think we should look out for as the season kind of winds down?
Oh man, I mean, first off, I wanted to mention too, I love this new format for the standings. I think what it's done for the league, what it's done for teams. I mean, it's really messed some teams up. Obviously, you can't count out Buffalo, you can't count out Colorado, but seeing them struggle the way they are against some of these West teams that they're not used to facing, it really mixes things up. I think going down the run, I still think Albany is going to be a little bit of a powerhouse. I mean, Doug Jameson's been phenomenal this year. The defense has been pretty good. The one big thing on offense that I really love with Albany is they pick up a ton of loose balls and they keep that possession going for a minute and a half, 2 minutes sometimes straight, right? And they're just wearing down the defense. You do that with a bunch of those young guys that can score. That's no brainer. Toronto, love Toronto. TD Erlin's such a beast on the dot. I mean, even going up against some of the best, he's still coming out with a winning face-off percentage at the end of the game. I think they can do some good things too. I mean, I think a little bit more consistency in goaltending, and I know that's bad to say because Nick Rose, I think, leads the league in goals against and save percentage, but the defense has been really, really good. And I think that's a big part of why his numbers are so good as well. The offense obviously is taking care of business. I mean, they struggled against Calgary. They didn't score a ton against Vancouver. But they're finding ways to get it done, and I think that's a big help to the defense there. And yeah, honestly, I think San Diego, people have kind of been thinking San Diego the last few years with the talent they have on paper. Irregularity in net, maybe learning from Mike Poulin as a backup definitely helped a little bit more. But I mean, I don't think you can roll them out. I think coming into the kind of the lower spot in the playoffs, you definitely can't roll out Calgary. You can't roll out Panther City. And I don't think, as much as Philly's kind of struggled, I feel like if they can get a momentum change going, they could make a run down the rest of the season and catch that 8th spot or something. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I hope Philly maybe can catch that run after this next weekend when we face them. That'd be nice for them. I'll say this. So with San Diego, because you touched on them, I kind of compare them. I mean, for us down here, the best comparison I could say was so a couple years ago, the Los Angeles Rams for the NFL. They kind of went all in. They got a bunch of free agents. They brought in players and made a championship caliber team, and it won them the Super Bowl, which is great. And I think that's what San Diego was trying to do. They were trying to bring in these different pieces, make a championship team, and unfortunately it just didn't go their way. But they're still a team to deal with. They're still a team to look out for. Man, that the overtime game against them last Friday, that was a game I was at, and I was nervous the entire fourth quarter and overtime, just because I know that's the type of team they are. And so having them, come in and beat us in overtime, I hate to say it, man, like Stotts too. That man's the real deal.
I got a question for both of you guys now. Do you think there's too much star power on a team?
Ooh. Not if it, for me, I would say not if it's managed correctly. I think there's a way that you can have those multiple power players and be able to spread it to the point where it's not all on one person's shoulders or two people's shoulders. And I'll say that just because from Panther City, from our point of view, we've had to rely on that a few times this year. We've had to rely on Crawford and Malcolm showing up for a game just for us to win, or Crawford and Donville, or Donville Malcolm, and that's happened kind of too many times. And you talked about our offense. I think that's something they do need to manage more of, and that's something I think they continue to work on. But I don't think there's no such thing as too much. You just have to find a way to balance it out. I don't know, Andy, what are your thoughts?
I think in the regular season, it's a luxury more than a curse or something you have to deal with. However, once you get to the playoffs, that's when you really kind of have to see teams tighten the screws on their chemistry. Like San Diego, for as good as they've been in the regular season, they haven't quite been able to get over that hump and get to those deeper rounds of the playoffs and whatnot. And this season, obviously, whenever whenever we watch them play, it's like, oh gosh, they got Stotts, they got Berg, they got Dane Belby in there. Thankfully, Brody Merrill retired and whatnot. And then, Ciliano and Origlieri were both great goalies. So, yeah, I would say that I think if it's a so-called problem, then it's a good problem to have. It's like a embarrassment of riches situation. You just got to hope that when it comes time to get down to business, get a goal when you need it, that guys aren't kind of playing selfishly and still working within the game plan of the team.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you touched on it there. When playoffs come, sometimes you do need those star players to step up. You can't. There are going to be those games where you're going to have them have a 3 or 4 goal game, a 9-point game, whatever, to be able to move past in the next round, like you pointed out with San Diego. Now, I don't know if there was another team you were kind of referring to, but but no, overall, I think it, like Andy said, it does come down to the playoffs, and will be interesting to see how this season plays out. Speaking of which, since obviously you'll have more interviews towards the end of the season, and we probably won't talk to you before then, do you have any guesses as to who you think that will make the finals this year?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I've been thinking about that actually for the past few weekends here, and I'm honestly stumped. I think it'll be nice not seeing the same teams in the finals over and over. I don't think Buffalo and Colorado will meet each other in the finals again, which is nice. I've been trying to think of who I think could do it, which goalies could take them there, and it's been hard. I mean, this is such a tough question. I mean, if you would have asked me last year or the year before, obviously I could have been pretty close to it, but
well, I would say unified standings, I mean, like you mentioned, kind of opens the door for endless possibilities.
Well, surely Toronto has to be one of your...
Oh, yeah, right.
I don't think that, though. I think they're good enough that they could get past the first round. I think, to me, and this is going to go back to the Nick Rose with his best goalie stats and that, but I think he's a little inconsistent. I think there's nights that he does play really well, and I think it shows that he's a top goalie, but there's nights too where I feel, in my opinion, and it might not be everyone's opinion, that he doesn't see the ball quite well either. So I think they'll make the playoffs, obviously, and I think they'll go past the first round, but I don't think they'll go to the finals. I mean, I would have to have San Diego in the finals. And I think there's going to be an underdog. I wouldn't be surprised if Albany got up there, got close to up there. I mean, I think there is going to be an underdog that faces San Diego, but I think ultimately San Diego is going to win. And if they don't, maybe it's time that they look about changing up the roster a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously San Diego's got to be one to look out for. I do like your pick about Albany. I think that's a team, once the playoff starts, it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that momentum from the regular season into the playoffs. But I don't know, if you talk about goalie inconsistency, we just got through talking about David. He has these games like against San Diego where it's like 85 or 86% save percentage, even though they lost the game, and then he turns around 2 days later and he's pulled twice during the game. So, goalie consistency and defense. I think defense is overall is still a main priority in making teams that championship caliber team. And if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter how high powered your offense is. Even if you score 15 points with your offense, if your defense ain't stopping it, they're probably up 19-15, So, I don't know. This year is going to be interesting. I'm very excited to see how the playoffs, happen here in the next, 7 weeks? One of my last questions. I mean, you obviously have a ton of interviews. Are there any players that you haven't interviewed yet, but you want to?
Yeah, so I'll do a little spoiler alert. Tomorrow night I am talking to Jason Knox.
Nice.
That was someone that I was really hoping that I could get on the podcast. I mean, besides him, it would be great to talk to Del Bianco, to talk to Connor Fields, and honestly, like Austin Stotts. I mean, he seems like a character, and so I'd love to just sit down and kind of pick his brain a little bit, hear his journey, hear where he's from, what he's about. I mean, Toronto-wise too, Dan Dawson, that would have been a great one. Latrell Harris is always a fan favorite as well. So those are a few that I fingers crossed, hope and a prayer, and we'll see what happens.
Nice. Knox is in market, so this might be your second call with someone down in Texas in a row.
Yeah, and I'll give you another spoiler alert. Tuesday night, I'm talking to Ronan as well. So anyone that listens to this will know a few coming up now.
Right. No, I mean, yeah. I mean, he's been doing good at face-off, so it was good to see him back in the lineup on Sunday. I will say this, and I like Knox. I think he's had an okay season. I did call him out early in the season just because his production wasn't what I expected, and actually I think Sheridan was doing a better job kind of pushing the ball and making it. At the beginning of the season, definitely the first few games, but he seems to have settled down now and kind of found his groove with that offense. So I think he'll do great these last few weeks.
Yeah, I'm a big Ohio sports fan too, so him being a Buckeye, it has a place in my heart there. So,
I'm sure you'll touch on that.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that. Do you keep a close eye on the college game pretty closely as well?
Not too much on college. I'm like Bengals fan, Reds fan. I mean, it's not the best thing to say. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes, but Bengals I can be proud of for now. Reds it's a touchy subject still, but yeah, I mean, I do like to watch some college sports. I like to catch some college lacrosse games if they're on TV here. So I mean, RIT is definitely a team though that I like to watch. I've had a lot of guys from RIT on it. So yeah, just big Ohio sports fan, but I mean, lacrosse in school has to be RIT.
I will say that's one thing I am slightly jealous of is up there, obviously, with TSN. They actually show a lot more box lacrosse and lacrosse games on public quote-unquote television, whereas down here, you almost have to search for it. And even then, it's like on the off-brand ESPN, or you have to go to like ESPN Plus and watch it, which is where we watch most of our games when we're not there. But or we get some so in Texas, and thankfully they're going away, but they had what they called Valley Sports Southwest, and
yeah,
it was just it was a horrible deal, but not everybody carried it, and then we like went to places to try to watch it, and there's only so many places that carried that channel. So no, I'm very jealous that you guys have at least a system up there that can spread the game.
Yeah, well, we cheat a little bit at home here. We have an Android box. So yeah, it gets all the sports channels. It's right. $10 a month, and it's great. Lacrosse, usually I use TSN Plus though to get a lot of the out of market games. I spend Friday nights, Saturday nights watching lacrosse. So I get TSN Plus and watch all the out of market games. But college and all that, it's all over the Android box there. So it makes it easy for sure.
I do have a kind of offhand question, kind of piggybacking off of just talking about different markets and stuff. I will say, so you started the podcast interviewing individual players. What made you decide to go towards individual players and not like a specific team or like a specific aspect of the league?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess a lot of it is maybe not growing up around the game and not having as many connections as if I would have grown up around the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, even for me now, it's still hard. Like I just message players and hope they'll answer, right? I've been fortunate enough to build a lot of friendships and a lot of connections through it. So sometimes I can get maybe like Craig Wendy to get someone that he played with on Georgia to come on, or Kyle Waters to get someone from Calgary that he played with. But yeah, so probably just that. I did last year have the opportunity to co-host the Georgia Swarm podcast with one of the ladies that work there, and that was a really cool experience. We only got like 3 episodes done or something because we started it late in the season. But that was still a lot of fun. It was a cool experience for me, being able to do that, having that feeling like I was part of this Swarm organization. Getting to talk to Dobson and Lansbury and Mike Manley. So yeah, that was a really cool experience. But yeah, I think it's just not growing up around the game, not having those connections. I just kind of chose to focus more on the individual players and the teams.
Gotcha. No, I was curious because like some people, whenever they start a podcast, you have to kind of pick exactly what direction you're going to go with, and going with the players was pretty cool. Well, Eddie, did you have any final questions you wanted to touch on?
Not that I can think of, though. Speaking a little bit about the unified standings apps, I am very much looking forward to seeing Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Albany to close out our season in our home slate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we looked at the schedule for us going forward, and we're like, well, if we can get past Philadelphia next week, it's like a slaughterhouse for 4 weeks after that. and then we close the year against Calgary again, that knocked us out of playoffs last year. So I will say, Panther City, as young as they are, that was very much I would say a proud moment for us as fans.
Yeah.
Just we had a hard time with Calgary last year, and just to show up in that playoff game and make it competitive was, I think, something everybody wanted. So
yeah, and even without Coach TK, since he was out with that illness, so Toll took the reins and did a pretty good job.
Oh yeah, no, I keep forgetting about that he wasn't there. So maybe things might be a little bit different this year. For both of us, we both want at least a playoff win, because if we can get one win, that means we can at least get one home game. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Well, if we don't have any other final questions, I wanted to give this opportunity to you, Corey. Any thoughts or shout outs that you want to do to finish up this podcast?
Yeah, it's nice being on this end, first of all, for this. But yeah, I got a few shout outs here. I've mentioned his name a lot already. Craig Wendy, one of my best friends, has helped me through a lot. The support that he gives me is unbelievable. My wife Selena, my parents Jim and Cheryl, my brother Brandon. Yeah, just all the support through growing the podcast. There's been times where it hasn't really been roses and sunshines, and they kind of helped me through that. So extremely grateful for them. A few more here. My good friends Alicia and Jay and their kids, Charlotte, Caleb, and Caden. My other friend Jason, and then the guy that kind of kicked it all off, my good friend Reed. Without him, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys. So yeah, shout outs to all of them for sticking by my side and supporting me through everything. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on the podcast as well. I really appreciate coming on and being invited on here.
No,
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we love having guests on. Where can people find you online on social media? Where can they find your podcast?
Yeah, so pretty boring. Facebook, there is a page. It's just Lax in the Booth. Instagram, @Lax in the Booth. Podcast, Spotify, Google, Apple. Yeah, so that's where you can find me. And you'll see me kicking around any arena at any time in Ontario, or sometimes in Rochester or Buffalo. So
next time Toronto comes down here, we'll have to see if we can get you down here for Fort Worth, Cowtown kind of get together or something. But well, again, we can't thank you enough for coming on. We appreciate you coming on, spending some time talking about not only the podcast but the Lacrosse in general. And thank you all for listening, and we thank everybody for tuning in, listening to our show. Be sure to follow us also on Instagram, Facebook, X/Twitter. And of course, we have a bunch of videos on YouTube. Be sure to check that out. While we end this, I am once again Nicholas,
And I am Andy.
and you are,
Ori.
and we'll see y'all next time.
Sweet. Cheers, y'all.
Take care.